this ask number one is to be as honest and as vulnerable as possible. Now, I usually explain that of all of the asks, I think this one is the most important, because if we don't figure out how to do this one in a genuine and authentic way, the rest of the asks do not matter. Think about how many times you have been in a surface level transactional conversation. Sure, there was no risk, right? You didn't feel uncomfortable, but you didn't gain anything either. Now I want you to think, especially if you're the kind of person who shows up in spaces as a caregiver, as one who gives service to others, as the go-to, the plug. If you are that person, I want you to think for a second about those who you've been able to come into service for, to help, to support, right? Those who believe that you are the ones who can change their lives, or even maybe just make their day a little bit better. When you think about the people who you've had true meaning, true value in their life, have you ever been able to do that and not known a little bit about that person's business? Like, got in their business just a little tiny bit, right? We can't really help people in a serious and meaningful way if we don't know a little bit about them on a deeper level. Knowing more about a person is how we understand what makes them feel safe, what makes them feel threatened, right? So that we can make a conscious decision about how we behave, how we interact with them, so that we're not doing something egregious, right? If I know a little bit more about you, then I have an understanding about what makes you tick, what bothers you, what doesn't bother you, what makes you feel uncomfortable, right? How I might be pushing or pressing when I may not even know I'm doing so. In order for that to take place, for me to take better care of you, I need to know you better, right? Now, it is perfectly understandable why people don't share, right? We got a bazillion reasons. Many of them, I don't trust folks. I don't know you like that. What if you weaponize this information against me? The list goes on and on and on, right? Sometimes it was in our brought up seat where we were taught to not share personal business. That's house business, right? We don't want to be uncomfortable with giving too much information about who we are, because we don't know. That's the unknown. What happens after I share this, right? Then I'm an open book and I feel like I'm just all the way out there. However, how then do we form relationships, right? Think about the human systems that you're part of. Not just work, right? But we have work, we have school, we have faith-based spaces, spiritual spaces, we have family, friends, right? We have all of these environments where there are other people there. And the funny thing is, human beings were designed to be social, but we do the very most in trying to not be social. We go to the grocery store and we run for the self-checkout so that we don't have to talk to anybody. We're on the elevator pressing them close buttons to like, please don't let me have to ride in this elevator with anybody else, right? And the thing is, we're designed to be social. It is that something has often happened when we're in the space and the place in our energy where we don't want to talk to nobody. I don't want to talk to nobody. I don't want to see nobody. I don't want to form no relationships, no new friends, right? Where did that come from? Where did that come from? And if I am to be close to someone, especially if I got too much on my plate, y'all, a lot of life and adulting is not something we can do by ourselves. You cannot do all of this on your own. You are going to need other people to get through this thing called life. It is messy out here in these streets. So how do we do it? How do we figure out how to go through this journey, not just of life, perhaps of healing, of discovering who we are, figuring out our purpose, our passions, what we are called to do? They're going to involve other people. It is even better if we can figure out how to do that with real, authentic relationships. And that calls for us to be as honest and as vulnerable as possible. Now, here's the thing. When this was suggested to me as a thing that folks needed, part of what they said is, listen, if I'm going to be in a space and I'm going to be talking for real, we're not having a regular, transactional conversation. We're having a real conversation. Like, we for real talking. Like, if we're going to for real talk, then I need to know that you're being honest. You're opening up. You're sacrificing something. This isn't just me bleeding out my story to you, but you're sharing something as well with me, right? I want to know that when we walk out of this space, I know you and you know me a little bit. There's a dialogue, mutuality in this experience that we're going to have together, whether it's one shared experience or whether it's a multitude of conversations that eventually forms a relationship. I need to know that we are both in this. We both are risking something, right? So then it's not just me out here wondering what happens after this moment. So with that, then that means that we're practicing something deeper. This means when I'm talking with you and I'm sharing a little bit about me, and I'm hopeful that you're sharing a little bit about you, we're practicing something much more beautiful, right? Than just, let me get out of this self-checkout real quick. There is a South African word, and the word is sawubona. Sawubona. I share this a lot in some of my time speaking with others. Sawubona means I see you, right? Not just see you optically, but I see you in your wholeness and your fullness, your energy, your vibe, your spirit, who you are. I see you, and I hold all of that near and dear. I recognize that you are a whole and complete person with experiences, pains, passions, pleasures, purpose, right? Idiosyncrasies, weird kinds of things about you. There might be some stuff that I see in you. If I truly lean into seeing you, there might be things I see in you that you may not yet see in yourself, right? And if I leave myself to be open and you leave yourself to be open so that I can see you, and I choose to see more, I see a fullness of a whole beauty of a being, right? That is you. Deeper practice of it, I see you through my eyes. My parents see you through my eyes. My grandparents, the whole lineage that I come from sees you and the lineage that you come from, and just being able to be present with who you are. And then the response to Sawubona is Shikoba. Shikoba means I am here, right? You made me be present in this space when you saw me, when you allowed me to be vulnerable. You let me be present in this space, right? The relationship between Sawubona and Shikoba means before you saw me, I did not exist. Y'all, when we see people for real, right? When we practice being honest and vulnerable for real, this means I opened up. I let you see me, y'all. So this means together, right? Before you saw me, I didn't exist. I wasn't in this space. I was invisible. And I know sometimes we want to be invisible, but on a deeper human being level, that's not truly what we seek, unless there's some pain that we need to work through, which is another conversation on another day. But the healthiest versions of ourselves need to feel valued and appreciated, not for what we did or the thing that I gave you or the way that you benefited from something from me, but just because I exist. I am worthy of being visible and valued, right? So that's why this matters. That's why it's important. This validates our humanity in being seen and heard and felt and appreciated in who I truly am, not the representative that I send that I think is more amenable and palatable for this session, right? So we want to make sure, again, folks said, if I'm going to do this, I want to do this in a real way. I don't want to have another transactional conversation. I want to have a real conversation. So let's talk a little bit too about what the risks and the rewards are for practicing ask number one. Ask number one, being as honest and as vulnerable as possible. One of the risks when we don't do this, or we don't do it well, or we don't do it right, or we don't do it sincerely, is we don't have insight on other people nor ourselves. I don't know who you are really if you're not being honest. And if I'm not being honest, you don't know who I am. And if we want to go too deep, if we're doing that perpetually and sustainably, I don't know who I am either, because I don't lean in to figure out the depth of who I am so that I know what I want to share. What do I want people to know about me? What do I want people to be able to honor in my story and who I am and my identity, so that we can do better work in the world, right? This allows us to have insight if we practice it. Without it, we have lack of insight. Without the practice of this ask number one, we're at risk of code switching, right? We don't really want to culturally code switch. Let's take a second to unpack code switching. Code switching is when there's this authentic version of me, but when I'm in this space, I don't feel that it's safe for me to be this version of me, so that I tweak certain things so that you don't see the real me. This isn't really how I talk, or this isn't really how I dress, or this isn't really how I behave. I'm giving you a version of me that is coded, that I believe is safer for me to be in that space. Drastic code switching ends up being dangerous. We know that there's some places where, in order to be respectful or to be professional, we may have to adjust the volume and the tone of who I am, but I shouldn't have to change who I am to be accepted in a space. And when we're code switching, that means we're probably changing. And we don't want to do that. When you don't see me authentically and honestly, I'm at risk of code switching, and that gets dangerous. Another thing that is at risk when we don't do this one well is a lack of connection. I know that I've definitely been in places and spaces with folks where they're being honest, right? Honesty is great, But if you're honest but not vulnerable, we're not connected. And if you're not connecting to me and you're not open to me, that is a signal for me. This is another risk, right? To let me know what about this space doesn't feel safe for you that you're not opening up? Does that mean it's not safe for me and I shouldn't open up either? Right? Because you and I are setting a tone together. We're picking up each other's energy and vibe. And if you're telling me you don't trust me enough to feel safe, then should I not trust you either, right? I'm learning through the practice of being in a relationship. And we're going to be practicing. We're either practicing it well or poorly, right? But I'm learning something by what you do or do not share. Another risk that we face regarding this practice of ask number one is if you're not opening up, then this gives me permission to close off, right? Then instead of being honest and vulnerable, I'm going to shut down. You're closing down. You're not sharing anything. You're not being vulnerable. I don't see who you are. I don't feel connected to you. I can't see you. So then that lets me know that maybe you can't see me either, or maybe you shouldn't, right? So then you've given me permission to shut my mouth and then really to shut down who I really am. And that starts getting us in the practice of not feeling safe, right? There's threat here, whether perceived or real. And so I'm going to close that off. And that is absolutely not the practice of ask number one, of being as honest and as vulnerable as possible. And then the last thing that I want us to really consider is something that was mentioned earlier. What if I'm the person that needs the help? What if I'm the person that needs the support? What if y'all, as supporters, caregivers, people who serve and support other people, sometimes we're exhausted. Sometimes we need the very support that we give other people. And we know that it requires someone to see us, to know details about us, for us to receive help, because that's what we need for other people, right? How can you help me if you can't see me, if you don't understand me, if you don't know how I operate, how I think, how I feel about things? You wouldn't know what to give me. You won't know what I need. You won't know what I want. You won't know how I need to receive these gifts that you may have to give to me. Everything stops regarding the support that I may need to do the work that I'm called and purposed to do if I can't open up and be vulnerable. Right? So I really want us to think about, there's a cost with everything, right? There's a cost if we don't share. There's a cost if we do. There's a cost if we're not honest. There's a cost if we are honest. There's a cost if we are not vulnerable. There's a cost if we are vulnerable. And when it comes down to it, especially with this practice of ask number one, we have to decide, what am I willing to pay for what I want to receive? And if you want to be able to have conversations, relationships, experiences and spaces where it feels like you can practice being more brave, right? More courageous, a little bit safer, then that is going to require you to open up a little bit, right? Now, a couple considerations when we're talking about this practice of ask number one. I want you to consider that you are valuable as you are. You are valuable without having to produce anything in your story, right? Anything that is like, well, here's this thing that qualifies me. You're qualified because you exist. You are valuable. I want you to consider that you're worthy, right? Sometimes we think, well, don't nobody want to hear about this anyway. Don't nobody care about it. What if I do? What if your story is worthy of being heard? What if your story is worthy of being told? I want you to consider that it is. It is, and that you are. I want you to consider that there's power in your story. Sometimes I've heard some folks say, particularly young people, there's nothing that, nothing's going to happen. Well, what if? What if something could happen? I want you to consider that there's power in your vulnerability, that you can change the room, you can change the space, you can potentially change a mind when you are vulnerable. And when that vulnerability is transparent in a space, right? I want you to consider that your fear of pushing past an apprehension for being vulnerable could be perceived as bravery, right? And that your bravery might be needed in a space. And in fact, what if your bravery is contagious in the space by being honest and being vulnerable? I want you to consider that we're all human. Sometimes we don't want to share because I'm not interested in someone figuring out that I'm a hot on fire mess. Guess what? We are all a hot on fire mess. And all that you would be proving is that you're a human being. I want you to consider that we're all human beings and we all got some hot mess going on. Nobody has it 100% together. What if your vulnerability normalizes the space and makes it safer for everyone by saying, like, this is the real me, right? And I don't want to polish and code switch in this moment. This is me. This is who I am, right? The real me. What if it makes you actually relatable? And then the other thing, the last thing that I want you to consider is feelings versus thinking, right? Sometimes we get stuck in thinking because thinking feels safer than feeling, particularly in a space with other people. I can be in here, right, and not feel like I'm at risk of something tremendously harmful happening. But if I get all up in here, we get caught up in our feelings, that may be true, right? That may be true. So our feelings will tell us things that are not true. Perhaps. But there is also, if we think about it, if we sit still in it and then we feel it, there's an authenticity that are in feelings, right? Like when you don't feel safe, that's real. That's real. It's okay to share that. Wouldn't that be authentic? I don't feel comfortable right now. That's real. That's a feeling, and it's authentic, and it's beautiful, and it's important. It's important for that to be shared. Notice, pay attention to being able to decipher what I'm thinking versus what I'm feeling. And more importantly, being able to articulate that to someone else can make all the difference in the world. So as we wrap up on this processing of ask number 1, being as honest and as vulnerable as possible, I want to give us a starting place, right? For some of you, you're like, practice it, done, moving on, give me the next ask, right? But for those of us who are not sure where to start, I want to give you a way to think about this, right? One is, I want you to be prepared the next time someone says, how are you? Particularly if it's someone where you're in an authentic relationship with, right? A true friend, a true chosen family member, a true colleague who you are connected to, right? They know a little bit about you. When they ask, how are you? The next time you get that question, answer it for real, right? Not, I'm good, I'm fine, I'm fair to the middling. It's all good. Maybe it's not all good, maybe none of it's good. Maybe only a piece of it's good, right? What if your true answer when someone says, how are you? I want you in your head to think, how are you really? How are you really in this moment? And try seeing what it feels like to answer that question honestly and vulnerably, right? Does it mean when someone says, how are you? Your true answer is, I'm having a rough day today. Or how are you? I'm really tired. And not just didn't get enough sleep, but I'm a little bit exhausted. I just got a lot going on. Honest and vulnerable. What if that is the release that you needed to be able to breathe through the next couple hours, right? So this homework assignment, right? Or this place to start might be the check-in before you begin this relationship, this conversation with folks, to really actually be present, right? Be honest in your presence. Be here now. Sababona, see them, right? Let them see you. How are you? This is how I am. Check in before you begin with your conversations and your interactions. Guess what, friends? This does not take 100 years. This don't take 2 hours. This isn't, oh my goodness, Kim just added a whole extra hour to the meeting. Nope. This can take just a few minutes. I've done honest and vulnerability moments with folks in seconds. It could sometimes just be how you look at a person, how you hold space with them, right? How you listen to them, letting them know you hear them, you see them. That does not take a long time. But the more you do it, the more they'll realize they can be transparent with you and that you are in a space where you can be transparent with them. And there is no better feeling than knowing that maybe not for the rest of the world, but you got a couple places or spaces of people who, when you stop and breathe air with them and vibe with them, they see you. They see you. Why? Because you both have practiced the engagement of being honest and being vulnerable with yourselves and with each other. And that, people, is ask number 1. So what if I heal myself so that when I come into these new human spaces, what I actually bring inside of shadows